Have you ever heard a story that sounds completely made up, but it's 100% true? Well, get ready. Imagine a huge, booming city that's growing so fast it's literally sinking into a swamp of its own making. The problem was so bad, the only solution they could come up with sounds like something out of a science fiction movie. They had to physically lift the entire downtown. Buildings, streets, sidewalks, the whole shebang. This is the absolutely incredible story of 19th century Chicago.
To really understand just how bad things were, you just have to listen to the jokes people were telling back then. I mean, this wasn't just some funny exaggeration. This was daily life. This dark humor was their reality in a city that was literally being swallowed by mud.
And yeah, the consequences were no laughing matter. In just one cholera outbreak back in 1855, this was the death rate. 1 out of every 16 people. The city wasn't just dirty, it was deadly. So this wasn't about making things a little nicer. This was about pure survival. Okay, so to really wrap our heads around the unbelievable solution they came up with, first we have to wade into the muck and see just how massive this crisis really was. Just try to picture this for a second. Chicago was built on a swamp, barely a few feet above the level of Lake Michigan. So all the waste from this exploding population, and we're talking thousands of horses too, it had nowhere to go. It just sat there, stewing into this permanent, disease-ridden layer of foul-smelling mud. It was so bad that any wooden sidewalks they built would just rot and sink almost immediately. So the problem was obvious, right? The city needed a modern sewer system. The solution, though? Well, that was anything but obvious. Look, in any other city on Earth, the plan is simple. You dig trenches, you lay your pipes, and you let good old gravity do the work, pulling all the nasty stuff down and away. It's Sanitation 101, a principle we've used for centuries. But, and this is a huge but, for Chicago, there was a massive, fundamental problem. Here's the kicker. The city was basically at the same level as Lake Michigan, so digging down was impossible. You'd hit water almost instantly. It's like trying to dig a basement in the middle of a swimming pool. A sewer system wouldn't drain. It would just pour all that filth directly into the lake, which also happened to be the city's only source of drinking water. They were totally, completely stuck. So what do you do? I mean, seriously, think about it. If digging down is off the table and gravity is working against you, what possible option do you have left? Well, the only direction they could go led them to one of the most audacious, most mind-boggling engineering plans in human history. You don't dig down. You go up. You lift the entire city. And I'm not speaking in metaphors here. This was the actual plan, put together by an engineer named Ellis Chesper. The city would physically hoist its entire downtown into the air, creating a whole new ground level, just so they'd have enough space underneath for a sewer system that could actually work. And get this wasn't some quick job. We are talking about a project that took 2 full decades to complete. An entire generation of people in Chicago grew up watching their city slowly, unbelievably, rise up around them. Okay, so the big question is, how in the world did they actually pull this off? This is where the story gets even crazier. The key was an army of men and a surprisingly simple tool, the jack screw. Innovators, like a young George Pullman, perfected this technique. They would literally put thousands of these jacks under a building's foundations. Then, on a single command, hundreds of men would turn their screws just one notch, all in perfect unison, lifting these massive buildings, tons and tons of brick and stone, with incredible precision. So, just to give you a sense of the scale, for one of the biggest lifts, it took 600 men working together with 6,000 jack screws placed under a single city block. And over 4 incredibly slow, careful days turning those screws notch by notch, they lifted an entire block of downtown Chicago right into the air. But here's the part that just blows my mind. For the most part, life just went on. This quote about the Tremont Hotel is the most famous example. The guests literally went to sleep one night, and when they woke up the next morning, the entire hotel was several feet higher, and they hadn't felt a thing. Shops kept their doors open for business while the whole building was being lifted from underneath them. It's just unbelievable. But solving a problem this huge doesn't come without a cost. The project created a brand new and very permanent division in the city. It really was a tale of 2 levels. What happened was a stark social divide became physically baked into the city's landscape. If you were wealthy, you could afford to have your fancy stone building raised up to the new, clean street level. But if you were poor, you couldn't afford the lift. So you had to adapt. People ended up turning their second-story windows into their new front doors, leaving their entire ground floor buried, creating what they called sunken houses. So, in the end, the legacy of the Great Chicago Lift is, well, it's complicated. On the one hand, it was this stunning triumph of engineering that absolutely saved the city and became a world-famous symbol of human ingenuity. But on the other hand, it physically built a class divide into the architecture of Chicago, a divide that, believe it or not, you can still find traces of today. And all of this leaves us with one final thought. The Great Chicago Lift proves that sometimes the most insane, outlandish idea is the only one that's actually going to work. It really makes you wonder, what are our impossible problems today, and what kind of radical upward thinking are we going to need to solve them?